guys, it's Thomas here, and we're on episode 8 of the Marineland Monterey Mega Build. On the last episode, we did the wet test, and everything passed with flying colors. No drippy, no water anywhere. The plumbing was good, the bulkheads were good, the tank was obviously good. And now we get to move on to probably the most fun part of setting up any aquarium. I mean, other than adding fish, and that's decor. Are you excited? I'm excited. Obviously, I'm excited. I think you guys remember last time I was saying I was waiting on a key piece of equipment for the decor. The key piece of decor that I've been dying to show you guys is not here yet, and it arrived. So I can finally show you guys that. We're gonna dive right into that. But first, let's talk about the theme, which will set everything up and show you guys why I picked what I picked. When it comes to decorating tanks, I've done all kinds of stuff. Some stuff I'm proud of, like full-fledged reef aquariums, beautiful coral, and some stuff that I don't really talk about, like castles and ponies and rainbow plants. What I personally really enjoy doing is natural-looking aquariums. So I'm going to skip the castles and ponies and rainbow-colored plants, and I'm going to work on a really natural-looking theme so that the fish stand out against it. I don't want the background and everything to be visually distracting. I want the fish to be in the forefront and then be really what's catching your eye. And I want everything behind the fish and around the fish to look natural and essentially mimic their habitat so that both the fish are comfy and I enjoy looking at the tank. So in order to accomplish that, I like to keep things pretty simple. I don't want to use too many different elements because that can actually get visually distracting. And to help tie everything in together, a really good practice is to stick to natural earthy colors and tones and make sure that you're using all hyper-realistic decorations. So either using completely natural decorations like real driftwood, real rock and stone, etc., or making sure that if you do go with artificial, that it is really gunning for that hyper-realistic look. Because if you throw a resin ornament in there that doesn't quite look natural, it'll throw everything out of whack if that realistic look is what you're actually going for. So for this beast, I picked one thing to really set the stage and make that realistic look as apparent as possible. And I can't wait to show it to you guys. It is an Aqua Decor custom 3D background. You ready for this? Let's take a look. So when I first came across Aqua Decor, I was completely blown away by the staggering amount of different 3D backgrounds that they make. They're all made by hand and the quality is crazy. I knew I was going to get into one. I just had some questions I needed answered, and I contacted Boyan of Aqua Decor, and he put my mind completely at ease. These are incredibly high quality backgrounds, insanely realistic. They're all made individually by hand and they're all one-offs. So you can get a background that will look pretty similar, but because they're all done by hand, it's not going to be identical. You're going to get your very own custom background. Aqua Decor makes their backgrounds out of a reinforced rubber as opposed to a fiberglass or foam, and that reinforced rubber is pigmented. So the color you see on the background isn't paint. That's actually just the color of the rubber. So when you go to scrub these backgrounds or clean them or take algae off them, you don't have to worry about destroying the background, which is a massive plus because I've worked with some foam backgrounds in the past and paint flakes off over time and it just changes the way the background looks and then it's never going to be the same and then you're worried about cleaning them and it's just a nightmare. I want something that's gonna last the life of the aquarium, and Aqua Decor backs their backgrounds for life. So if anything happens to that background that is irreversible and it's from the craftsmanship or the quality of the background that they put together, they're gonna go ahead and replace that for you, which is a huge plus to me. Just like my tank, just like the sump, I really look for a solid warranty that a company stands behind because it tells me the faith they have in their product and they know that product's gonna last for their customers. When I started looking at the different backgrounds and styles they made, it blew me away because there was more stuff to look at than I could even wrap my head around, really. But I had an idea of what I wanted, and I really wanted to mimic the natural stone and rock that I see up north. It's a nice deep gray color, sometimes even heading towards black, lots of different lichen and stuff on it. And I figured, you know what? That would look really cool in an aquarium, and Aqua Decor actually had one that looked quite similar, so I picked that one out. It happens to be one of their slimline backgrounds, which I really liked as well because that means it's not going to take up much space in the tank at all, leaving lots of room for the fish to swim around. And just to tie everything in, I saw they did faux stones and faux wood, so I picked some of that up as well, and it all ties directly into the background. And then I went a step further and said, hey guys, I've got overflows in this tank. You think you can make me some custom overflow covers? And they're like, you know what? Of course, because that's what we do. We do custom. And I'm like, perfect. So I ordered those as well. And it looks incredible, I have to say. And there's no way I could have done this with natural stone because natural stone weighs a lot. And even if I tried to mimic this, it would weigh way more than I'd be comfortable with putting on the bottom panel of glass, although it can hold quite a bit of weight. And also it would have taken up way more space in the tank. And I didn't want to sacrifice any of that. Now, as I mentioned, Aqua Decor's backgrounds are made out of rubber, and their slimline backgrounds are only rubber, whereas their larger custom backgrounds have a foam core and the rubber's over top. The slim lines are completely flexible, and the nice thing about that is that if I need to get this in and out of a tank that has center braces, like this 30-inch tall background is going to go into that tank without issue because it's only 24 inches front to back. So you can imagine if I was trying to jam this in and it was stiff, there's no way it's going in there with those braces. So I can actually just fold the background completely, slide it into place, and we're gold. The other thing they do, which is super, super important, is their backgrounds, if they have to come in two pieces, like this much larger background, they do it in a way that is not a straight line, which is super important. If you had a straight line straight down the middle of the background, you could imagine how visually distracting that would be. No matter what you did to try and cover it, there's a straight line there and your eye's gonna go to it because there are no straight lines in nature. So that being straight down the center of the tank, you'd notice it right away. So they've gone slightly off to the side and they've made sure it's jagged so that when I put these two pieces together and they match up, there's no way your eye's gonna be immediately drawn to it and you probably would never notice it. Now the Slim Series rubber backgrounds also sink, so you don't necessarily have to silicone them in place, but because I wanted this to be super slim against the back glass and it is a very big background and because those overflows are there and I can't necessarily go tight from one pane of the glass to the other pane, I have to sit in between the overflows, they've made it nice and thin and directly against the overflows and I'm gonna have to silicone them in place. So they also went ahead and on the back of these backgrounds have given me specific points where I can silicone the background to the back glass so it's not gonna move, which is perfect. The only thing is I currently have my FX filters intake and outtake on the back glass. So I'm gonna have to find a new spot for that stuff. And when I figure out where it's gonna go, I'll show you. All in all, Aqua Decor gave me everything I wanted with absolutely none of the risk. And essentially, it's really gonna make the display. And I mean, I could go on and on with how impressed I am with this background, but I think just looking at it some more is a better way to show it off. Because words only speak the number of words you speak, but a picture is 1,000 words spoken. When it comes to putting substrate in an aquarium, I like to really think about what's going to look the best. So if I'm doing a wacky theme, I usually go with a wacky gravel to tie it in. If I'm going with a natural theme, I'm gonna go with something natural to try and tie it in. Now, gravel comes in lots of shapes, sizes, and colors. So when you're looking to try to do a natural setup and you want it to be able to be cohesive, you want to try to stick to the same color palette as the other items you have in the tank. So the background's obviously got a lot of dark grays, it's got some rusty colors, some sandy colors. So that's basically what I'm doing with this gravel. I'm gonna stick with that color palette, but I'm also gonna change the size of the gravel and mix a bunch of different things together so that it kind of flows. Because if you look at a riverbed or a lake bottom, you may have large stretches of sand, but you're also gonna have, if it's rocky, some bits of those rocks. They're usually weathered or rounded from being eroded. So that's what I've got here, a bunch of different grain sizes, a bunch of different colors, and I'm gonna mix them all together and it's gonna really tie in the background. So what I've picked out is some Carib Sea substrates. Carib Sea is probably one of my favorite companies when it comes to a nice natural substrate. They do everything from sands to different types of crushed corals for reef tanks or even planted aquarium substrates. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing plants planted in the bottom of this tank at all. So I'm going with an array of gravels and sand that is going to, in my opinion, look really cool together. So what I've got starting at the far end is a sand. Sand has its own trials and tribulations when you're using it in an aquarium, which can include getting into pumps if it gets kicked up and being very hard to gravel vacuum because sand is fairly buoyant when you start putting suction on it and it's going to want to travel up the gravel tube. So you got to be a little bit careful, but the visual appeal of sand is widely known. Everybody loves sand. A lot of people want to use sand and just don't want to deal with the hassle. I'm used to it. I've been working with sand for a long time, so I'm going to be using a bit of sand. I say a bit, but about almost half of the gravel that's going to be in here or substrate is going to be sand. And I've gone with the Sunset Gold sand because it's really close to the sandy colors and the rusty colors in the background. So I've got that. Next up, I've got the Carib Sea Sri Lanka gravel. The reason I really like this, again, it has a lot of similar tones that the background has, more on the sandy colors like the Sunset Gold, but it's got a lot of variance in grain size. It's got smaller gravel mixed all the way up with larger gravel, and it's all kind of sloshed in there together nice and even. So it's going to give you a really interesting texture and kind of go down to the sands level and then back up from there. And then what I've got on top of that is a little bit of Blue Ridge, which is a more constant shape than the Sri Lanka, but it's really focusing on those grays. So that's going to add a little bit more gray tones to my already very sandy colored gravel, which is going to help tie into the darker grays that's in the background. So I'm going to be mixing all that together, maybe make small portions where there is some more sandy bottom and then spread it out, going grain size all the way up to the larger grains with the Sri Lanka. But that's the idea with this substrate. It'll make a lot more sense when you see it in the tank, but for now I'm sure you get a pretty good picture. And then I've also got some larger pieces of rock here, which again, same color palette, and that's just going to be in and around the fake rock that I've got for the background, just to help, again, tie it up so it looks like it's slowly ramping up in stages, because gravel usually does that. If you look at a river bottom or lake bed or whatever, you'll see that you've got larger rock tapering off to smaller rocks and then eventually tapering off to where it's been eroded down completely, which is your sand. So when this is all in there, it's going to be pretty epic. Now, what's more natural than natural driftwood? Nothing, which is why I've gone with natural driftwood. There are pros and cons to natural wood. We'll start with some of the cons. If you get tannins in the water from the wood, it could really discolor the water, which some people really don't like, and then you're going to have to use some carbon to pull it out. That can be a little bit of an inconvenience. Natural driftwood also has a life expectancy underwater. It will slowly break down over time, but that's usually over the course of many years, so it's not that big of a deal as far as I'm concerned. The big pros I find is that if you're keeping fish from a region that do have tannins in the water, you don't have to necessarily add a black water extract or ketapang leaves or something like that, because you will get some of the tannins from the wood. Another thing is that because it's a natural wood, they're completely unique pieces. You're never going to see two pieces that are exactly the same in any tank, because if you have that piece of wood that randomly grew that way, that's yours to keep, and that's going to be yours in your display, and it makes your display unique. So I like to have a variety of different driftwood in displays, because it makes me feel like I've got a very unique looking aquarium, which I'm sure is many people's goals, right? Now, I've got a lot of wood here, probably a lot more than I'm going to use, but the key thing is when I'm doing a display, I want to have options. I'm never going to know exactly how a piece of wood is going to sit in the tank until I finally get it in there. A shape that I thought maybe looked really interesting when I was purchasing the wood may not look as good once it's in the tank, and I want to make sure everything's cohesive and ties in really well together. So I've got an array of wood in a bunch of different sizes, from this very large piece on the end here to the much smaller piece on this side. Various amounts of branching. I've got some that have pieces of rock stuck in them, some that are a little bit more plain, and really I think I've got a pretty good base here to start with. I definitely won't use it all. This is a lot of wood, but I'm going to use some of it for sure. One major reason I'm using driftwood in the display is to act as a visual barrier. Although the wood itself is gorgeous and it's going to add to the visual appeal of the display, its true purpose is to give the fish a way to separate themselves from each other if they're getting aggressive, as well as giving them a little bit of cover to hide in if they ever get nervous, because if a fish is just constantly nervous or feeling exposed, that can lead to a weakened immune system and they can get sick with things like ick, which you never want to have to deal with. So this is a great way to help them feel more comfortable in there and it still look amazing. I will say as well, you can get driftwood that has slate bases on it. I personally don't use the ones with slate bases, only reason being that I find myself unscrewing them a lot of time and trying to stick them on a different side because I want to turn the driftwood. So I find it a lot easier that I just don't get it with bases, pre-soak the wood, because once it's waterlogged, it's going to sink to the bottom anyways, and then get it where I want it to be. So that's how I do it. Now this is the Reptile Treasures wood. That's without the bases. They also have the Underwater Treasures wood, which comes with slate bases. which is a lot easier for many people because you can just drop it in and it's weighted and it stays there even after you fill the tank up. So essentially, I'm going to play around with it, see what fits best in different spots of the tank, pick out the wood that I feel looks the best in there and fits the best, and just go from there. And those are the components I'm going to use to transform this giant empty glass box into a beautiful underwater habitat for my fish. And I know it seems like a really simple recipe, basically a 3D background, some faux components, driftwood, and some substrate, but trust me when I say sometimes simple simply rocks. I think it's going to look really good. You'll be very impressed with how just a few components can really bring a display to the next level. So next time you see this tank, it's going to have the background in it, and we're going to focus on aquascaping. And I'm no Oliver Knott, so I'm probably going to mess up a whole bunch and change where something was 30 times over, and probably get frustrated and throw my hands in the air and say, forget this, and walk away, and then come back, and then do it again. And you'll get to watch me do that and suffer along with me, and Brian, who's behind the camera, suffering along as well. And if you have any questions regarding any of the components I'm using, feel free to drop that down in the comment section below or reach out to us on social media like Facebook or Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe, because if you don't subscribe, you will be late to the party and you'll see the episode long after everybody else did, and then you will feel left out. And I know you don't want to feel left out, so get on that. And as always, you should keep on tanking with decorations, because who wants a bare tank with nothing in it but a fish? Other than Joey.